Today we're getting under the hood with Dr. Kimberly Gordon, a mother, daughter, sister, women's advocate, and a double board certified psychiatrist, health equity consultant, and mindset coach in mental health and social justice, specializing in child and adolescent psychiatry. She's the founder of BHETC LLC and the medical director of iMIND Behavioral Health, Mobile Response, and Stabilization Services. She earned her BS from Xavier University of Louisiana and her medical degree at Tulane University School of Medicine. Dr. Gordon completed her general psychiatry residency and child and adolescent psychiatry fellowship at Tulane University School of Medicine. She's now an adjunct assistant professor at Tulane University and former director of the Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Fellowship Program at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. Through her coaching practice and consulting firm, BHETC, bringing health equity to communities, doing business as Dr. Kim Answers, Dr. Gordon passionately supports mental health equity initiatives for women, children, adolescents, and families. Her work has been honored with the American Psychiatric Association's Jean Spurlock Award and authored several peer-reviewed publications on the impact of racism on health disparities. She is a diplomat of the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology and a distinguished fellow of the American Psychiatric Association. She currently serves on the board of the American Association for Community Psychiatry and as a member at large and co-chair of the Child Committee for the Medical Director Institute of the National Council for Mental Well-Being. Wow. Welcome, Dr. Gordon.
Oh my gosh, I love it. And I don't know which iteration of my title that I feel so keen to right now. But I want to say that this is the first time on any platform that anyone has said live that I'm a mother. So thank you for that introduction as a mother and a daughter and a friend and a sister and all of that. I'm so delighted, Elizabeth, to be on this Under the Sisterhood. And it has such rich meaning for me as a radical storyteller and someone who has spent most of my career being a little afraid to tell my story, thinking that somehow telling my story would distract or take away from the joint or collective story for so many people like me. But I think it's in telling our story that we actually give power to our life journey and our work. So I'm delighted to be on this podcast to be able to do that with you today.
I'm really excited. It's season 4, our first podcast that we're dropping on Women's March for Mental Wellness. And so I'm like so delighted that I'm getting to get under the hood with you, Dr. Gordon. If it's okay, I'd love to get going.
Let's go. Let's get started.
Awesome. I love this question because it's really understanding what was that inflection point or that moment in time that got you in or the desire to go into the mental health and wellness space?
I love this question. And I always tell people that in your life, you have a number of transformational moments, inflection points. And so I don't think that any moment defines one moment without actually looking at the past and also seeing maybe where you are presently. But I remember being a little girl I grew up in the church. And so like if you grew up in the Bible Belt, there was a church in every corner. And a lot of times when you didn't get the support you needed from maybe your healthcare provider or your community, the church and that gathering, religious gathering, was a way to connect. But I remember one day, I think it was probably after church, my aunt, who was a hard worker, was driving around a cul-de-sac in the neighborhood that we lived in. And I think she was manic. I mean, I will never know for sure. I know she had a history of bipolar, but she drove around that cul-de-sac. I would say for me, it felt like for hours. And I remember asking my grandmother, why is she just driving around the cul-de-sac? Why don't she just like park her car and come inside? When my aunt came in, because I was a curious little girl, I asked her, what was the challenge? Why was she driving around? Was she on the phone? At that time, we didn't have cell phones, so obviously it wasn't that. But what was she doing? And she said, I feel like I'm just spinning my wheels. My life feels like I'm working and I'm not getting anywhere. So I wanted to do something about it. Now, for a little girl where the age I was, and I think I probably was like under 7, that had a profound impact on me. I certainly was proud of my aunt, but to think that someone who worked as hard as she didn't feel good about the work she was doing. So I think that actually opened up my eyes to mental health but also opened up my eyes to the struggle for women, right? For equity in your life, for the challenges with depression, anxiety, how that may look and manifest itself in real world in action. Granted, later in my life, I made the decision to become a psychiatrist, but I really remember that moment. And there were other moments after that that I could share in terms of my childhood journey, but also in my adulthood. But that was a defining moment for me, is how life can be so hard sometimes for some people that it almost feels like there is no escape from it.
So I don't even know where and how to unpack that. There is so much richness there. But as a little girl, that is so much to see. So that was an aha moment. But was it percolating in you throughout up through college, if you will, as a child and an adolescent?
Well, I would say a pivotal moment for me pre-adolescence. I was almost 10 years old. And I hate to even start the conversation this way, is that we had a tragedy in my family. Certainly I come from a family with a lot of privilege as it relates to support, but my grandmother had 14 children, right? So you can imagine there was a lot of activity going on, a lot of family gatherings and fun, but also a lot of pain, some deep secrets in the family. But one thing that happened that wasn't a secret, and I knew about it, was my uncle, who was like a father figure to me. He was brutally murdered by police in the city I lived in. It was a tragedy. It happened actually during what was happening in New York at the time with, I think it's they call them something else now, the Exonerated Five, or whatever that name is. And I was like, oh my gosh, no one ever wanted to talk about the story. The trauma was there, but there was also a lot of fear and a lot of suspicion about what that would look like if this got out in terms of my family and the dynamics. And so by the age of 10, I became a new person. Like I was like, I am going to go into the world and change it. Like I'm going to change how people see me, how they see my family. I'm going to fix all of these problems. So that little girl just became someone who became an advocate, a social justice person at heart. It started with, if someone's getting bullied at school, I was the person that was going to speak up against the bully, even though I got bullied myself, and that's another story. But, I was that person that I would champion other people's causes, not recognizing that there was a wound inside of me that needed to heal. That internal struggle became my superpower, right? Like I can get in front of a stage and I can share the good news, right? I can share the journey, but it's also a deep pain that had to heal, which brought me to becoming a child psychiatrist and learning more about the mental health, theories of personality and attachment and how that works, working with women and children and underserved communities. And that's been most of my work as a clinical educator, an academic leader, to writing papers about the trauma of social determinants of health, right? Where we work, live, sleep, play, love, in some places are war zones. I don't mean it in the sense that we're under attack. I mean in the sense that our central nervous system, our brain and our development is under attack because of the scarcity of resources. And I do believe that all roads lead to resources, but some of us are lacking in that support and needing the support from others to champion for them what equity really looks like. I know a long answer, but I think it's been so many moments, so many pivotal moments. I can't pick one. In college, however, I had the unfortunate of learning that my mom developed breast cancer. And that was a tragedy in itself. She was at that time 47 years old, still pretty young. And it shaped how I thought about what was going to happen for the next 10, 15 years of her life. And unfortunately, she passed away at the age of 57 from the progression of metastatic breast cancer. And I remember thinking that if someone like her could work so hard in her life, but didn't get to see the privilege of all the work that she put into because of lack of equity, because let's face it, many women are not being managed, their health care is not being managed appropriately. We're missing opportunity to detect breast cancer, but also to prevent it. And that was a tragedy for me, but also a reminder that even in our struggle and our resilience, there's time for us to actually really look at what we're doing in our healthcare setting. How are we treating the patients that we interface with and supporting them in their journey, but also giving them the tools to equip other people as well for future generations?
I mean, the social justice of, lack of health equity, is just, to witness your mom and obviously different things happening. I don't know the details of it, but experiencing that and having to champion and be that person who is advocating for her and knowing how to. I mean, that seems like, in this short conversation thus far, it seems to be at your core. As you went through school and this happened to your mom and you were, of course, learning, and then you went to med school. Talk a little bit about the journey and as you wove that in, because it seemed to be so natural to you.
Oh, natural, yes, but still a challenge. I think the reality is the things that happen in your life, I think is purposeful. Like I really believe in the source, the creator, to have a divine purpose and calling for all of our lives. And sometimes we have to take a look at how our story, our individual stories, provide those defining moments for us. My mom was a single parent for most of my childhood, but the one thing she always stressed was, Kim, you got what it takes, and it takes what you got. And she didn't say you have what it takes, because sometimes people try to misquote my mother. She said you got what it takes. And she said it with emphasis because she knew that as a woman of color, as a little Black girl growing up in not a segregated South, because it wasn't like the 70s or the 60s, but it certainly was a time where there was a lot of discriminatory behaviors as it relates to planning for how people live, our neighborhoods. She knew that wherever I was going to be placed, positioned, I had to posture myself a certain way, posture myself as someone who had whatever I needed to be successful. So in every place that I went to medical school, it was a predominantly white institution. Tulane is a really great school, but it's still really not as diverse as it could be. And I didn't have the money or the resources. And I was told many times that, why are you here? Maybe you should think about going somewhere else. And I mean, I remember telling one dean over my dead body, I got accepted. So unless you kick me out, I'm not leaving. I'm here. I'm here to stay. But I think that journey for me helped me appreciate how you can find kindness in others, because I saw a lot of kindness in the places that I be, but also there's a darkness in us. And most of us think it's about the division camps, like oppositional camps, right? So I'm on this side, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I'm an independent, or, I'm Black or I'm white, or I'm gay, I'm straight. And it's all these dichotomies that we use to define our identity. But I really have a message of like hope of how our identity is really shaped about our collective unity, right? Our humanity. That's what's at stake here. And so even though I have all of these like very interesting stories, I was a survivor for Hurricane Katrina. I mean, that's another story. A medical student in New Orleans uh, during Katrina. I was a fourth year medical student, homeless at the time, who experienced the devastation of Katrina as a homeless medical student. Now, when I say I was homeless, I was living from, I would say, grant to grant, because it wasn't paycheck to paycheck at that time. So whatever, subsidies or money I had was for that. But when Katrina hit New Orleans, everything was lost. I had to start over. And I experienced some of that. And there was some deep pain associated with all of those journeys. But God equipped me for all of that from day one. Like He knew that this was going to happen, right? And gave me the skill set to actually be resilient and to process that. And later in life, when I was ready to reflect on those individual traumas and the impact that it had, not only on my narrative, you said it planted a seed. I remember you said that. So some good seeds were planted, but there were also some bad seeds that I had to uproot, weed out, and figure out what those things meant.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because as I hear that, I mean, all of the women I'm speaking to, you're so incredibly credentialized. You have amazing backdrop of education and licenses. You're double board certified. You've done all these things. You published, what have you. But at the end of the day, it was those lived experiences along the journey that probably is able to really shape how you treat and how you listen, hear, see your patients, your clients, whichever capacity on a given day. It might be different for Dr. Kim Answers, but you know what I'm saying? The lived experiences really have shaped, it sounds like it's really shaped who you are as a psychiatrist in the mental health and wellness space. The people who are privileged enough and who go into that space to sort of help other people often to have the empathy and compassion, you have to live through some of it. And so I
Right.
think that's really interesting as it relates to, I mean, I'm sure you're only beginning on your story. So you go through medical school. I can't imagine the Hurricane Katrina, that you were part of that and that you survived at the other side of it. So what was that like coming out and then going into your residency and fellowship?
Well, I would like to say that it was just, ideal, but I would say racism, but the internalization of, lack of financial resources really probably took its toll on me throughout because I'm first doctor in my family, first generation doctor. If you can imagine the equity that came into my family because of that, but also the challenges of, the lack of resources. I think by the time I finished medical school, I was already burned out. Like life had been hitting me up inside, I was already burned out. But no one told me what success looked like, right? I hadn't seen what success looked like from the perspective that at that time I believed, right? And so there wasn't a doctor who I could look at and say, hey, well, this is what a doctor do to take care of themselves. They take a vacation and, they go on a sabbatical, they write a book. No one told me those things. And if I had a mentor, maybe I would have learned some of those things. But unfortunately, there were no mentors. It's definitely not ones who looked like me, but certainly the ones who didn't like me. Oftentimes, I don't know if they just didn't appreciate how much I didn't have or needed or didn't have a desire. Who knows? But it took a while for me to understand and appreciate that my journey was even more complex because I was doing everything for the first time without a roadmap. But my medical school journey was what it was, and then residency came, and it was enlightening for me. It was an exciting time. Again, generating some money, so that feel good. Putting that white coat on, so you have that privilege of being a white coat doctor, right? But I would take off that coat, Elizabeth, and walk in the same hospital because I live like in a apartment complex that I was able to get in the same building, and I take off that white coat, and no one recognized who I was. I would walk to professors who I had spent time with that same day, and they didn't know me by name. And I thought, wow, that's so odd that a coat could change how people see you, and you take that coat off, and then you're invisible again. And I think that actually is the struggle for a lot of people as it relates to building equity in their lives, is that they have bought the hype that their identity is wrapped into a certain package, right? Maybe as a degree, maybe as motherhood, because I had that experience too. Maybe as, being married. Whatever it is that you have decided was what shaped your identity, that becomes your success mark, your benchmark, right? But what if you get that benchmark, but you still don't find the joy? What if you get it and you don't feel anything, but I got another accolade? And I think that comes to also when you have this withering effect of burnout, is not taking the time to celebrate the wins. We all know our struggles. Like I started this call by telling you all the bad things that's happened to me. But what about the wins, right? What about the celebrations and a time for reset and transformation? I'm glad you mentioned that I'm a mindset coach. I probably should have said that, but as a mindset coach, it's different in psychiatry because in psychiatry you treat people, right? That's the framework. I'm going. You have an illness, or you are approaching some type of debilitating disease, and my job is to take that pathology and help you cope with it, help you live with it. Whereas coaching and the wellness space thinks of it a little bit different. It thinks about wellness as being a journey, it's on a continuum, right? So I may be approaching illness, or I may just be the weary well, right? But wherever on the continuum I am, there's a movement for transformation. There's a change, a catalyst that can happen in your life that supports you being your best version of yourself at any given moment, right? So yeah, maybe right now I'm overweight and I have a knee problem. We get older, we have knee problems, or we gain a little pounds. But that doesn't mean that I can't have that transformation and not be deemed as being ill, right? So healing is always there for us at every stage of our life. And it certainly has been there for me. Even having my two small twin girls is a healing for me, right? To have lost my mom. My mom actually had twins. I was supposed to be a twin, Elizabeth. I was actually born a twin, and my twin was, dead at birth, right? And so to be in this place now of being a mother of twin girls is a transformational moment. But I guarantee you, if you asked me that maybe a year ago, I wouldn't have thought that was possible. That's not something that I thought about. I know I'm talking a lot, but I want to just kind of give this message of hope, right?
You just described the fact that you're a psychiatrist, you deal with the pathology of illness and learning to cope, but then there's this mindset. So what happened when you became the psychiatrist and then the mindset coach? How did that sort of evolve, your journey with that?
So I think it evolved with me appreciating that a lot of the clients that I was seeing, we call them clients and patients, so it's interchangeable. But a lot of the individuals I was seeing, particularly the women, they had reached a point of their either their children having an illness or even having depression or anxiety themselves. However, before that point, there was the weary wheel. There was the narratives that they had been telling themselves. There was the social determinants issues that they had difficulty navigating because of lack of resources. And so they reached their breaking point. In the burnout literature, we talk about the 5 phases of burnout. We start off with, basically just feeling a little tired or feeling, hey, this is the honeymoon phase. Things are good. I got this new job. It's great, right? They like me. They invited me into all of these things. This is exciting. It gives me more money. And then you go into the phase where you're starting to experience the realities of the work, right? But you're coping, like you're fine. You may feel a little tired one day, but you miss some sleep and you get up and you keep going. And then you get into more of the chronic stress phase, right? And the chronic stress phase is actually where you have the problem. Any stress is good, but chronic stress, oh, wow, is withering your, what they call telomeres, your lifespan, right? And some of us have all of these things that's happening that's withering us all the time. My grandma used to say, black don't crack. That ain't true. Black crack, everything cracks. We all crack. Either we crack up with our skin or we crack up, but we're going to crack up if we're under chronic stress. And chronic stress can lead to all the things that we talk about, diabetes, hypertension, overweight, the weight that you can't get rid of, the depression that you can't get over, the sleep insomnia that you can't keep over, the anxiety. And when it gets to that stress point, at some point it become a crisis. I call the crisis as the moment for transformation. It's the point of no return. Either I'm going to stay where I'm at or something going to change. And I love that place. I've actually come to embrace that moment because that's when, breakthroughs happen. Because I do believe that I want to reach the women that are in crisis, not the women who are just the weary wheel. Those are great too, but in crisis because if something comes into you, the superpower to do something about it, right? So in the mindset space, what we learn is that transformational zone is the most uncomfortable. It feels like the coping zone where you were just kind of dealing with the problem, but not really addressing the problem. But in that transformational zone, you feel the same level of pain, but something shifts. Something gives you that grit, that superpower to put on that, resilience gene. And I encourage women to show up not only for their self, but show up for the future generation of women who really are relying on you to be there. But part of that is actually embracing self-care and self-compassion. I don't know how many awards I'm going to get before I feel satisfied with my success. Because someone told me that what success is based on all these things. So now I have to do some reframing of my thinking, right? Rewriting the narrative around what success actually looks like and defining it on my own terms, on my community terms, not what someone else says, but what would that 13-year-old girl say about Dr. Kim Gordon's success? That cul-de-sac that I told you about was a project. It was like a, artificial community that people create for people who are impoverished. That's what that cul-de-sac was that I was at the age of 7 or 6, right? Now I live in a cul-de-sac. I probably have one of the best piece of property in my neighborhood. But that 13-year-old girl would be so delighted in my success, but also worried that I missed the boat, right? Missed the boat on what community was supposed to be. So I had to redefine success in my way of thinking that community was really loving on the people who love you the most. If people are seen more and validated more, they show up more, right? It's nothing like someone telling you you're worthy that makes you feel validated and seen, right? And that's what we need more in the world, empathy for not people's shortcomings, but for their victories, for their breakthroughs. Sorry, I love this stuff.
Oh, and I love hearing it too. I mean, we couldn't be more aligned and in synchronicity because even when we created this platform under the sisterhood, the point was we live in a time where women aren't seen, heard, acknowledged, and celebrated. And so it's like that invisibility. And, I know that it could exist more in the BIWOC community than in the total community, but I'm not sure about that. If humanity valued humanity, if we really looked at and valued. And, it's interesting because I have these conversations with my kids, so I can very much relate to the need to hear, yeah, you're doing something really well. But back to your comment about, I don't know how many awards I can win to know how successful I am. I think that's a really interesting conundrum that I think society or the system that we live in has placed upon us. So do you want to, because I know that you're doing all of this work around this. You do it in the community, you do it around health equity. What have you learned? What are your thoughts around this subject?
If you had to look at your life in your old age and really define what a legacy meant to you, what would it look like? What are your core values, right? What do you stand for? How close do you feel you are to that, right? Maybe I won't get that, I don't know, let me think of some New York Times best-selling, who those things are great. And, hopefully I can attain some of those things in my life. But would I feel just as good if I knew that the people that love me the most, that I care about the most, felt seen and loved by me the same, that I felt loved and appreciated, but they felt it too. And I know that, when you get older, you really start thinking about these things more and they become more transparent. But I think even at a young age, you should remind yourself of what's the end goal. For me, the end goal was to bring, even as a little girl, to make sure that the people that look like me, because I was thinking about my family at the time, had the same type of health considerations that everyone else had. We call that, the health disparities, the health cultural responsive care, all of the language that we use is important. The language is important. But truthfully, we all have a mission. And to your point, I don't think that anybody is doing good right now. I don't think that anybody is feeling great right now. You go to any community and people are suffering, right? And I think that we're suffering because we've decided that we're different. And we just forgot that we were just alike, right? And that we needed each other to make this work. The American view, I think, is very individualistic. It's not as collective as it could be. And so it takes away our power, right? Maybe it gives some coins in some people's pocket. Maybe it fuels capitalism or patriarchy or whatever, racism, whatever language you want to use. But what really fuels human beings to actually produce great things is a unity. You can see it in the grass, you can see it in nature, you can see it in how babies connect with each other. You can see it in everything that we do, that there's a need for us to connect. COVID showed us that social disconnectedness is the number one offender for mental health illness in this world, right? COVID showed us how disconnected people become fearful, anxious, depressed, suicidal. The suicide rates go up. We actually have to take a look at that. I want to put a plug in for homelessness because I know CNN actually talked about that today. Our homeless levels are increasing. And guess what? Some of these people that you think are homeless are women and children. They're sleeping in their cars. They're visiting other family members because they have no place to stay. This is a country that has resources. There is no reason why we should have an increase in homelessness in a place like this.
I think you hit on something really big there. And I think that the social connectedness, when we come together and the unity forms, the feelings, I mean, what is that? Your endorphins, your serotonin, what goes up? Maybe you should be talking about
Dopamine,
exactly
all
the
of that.
dopamine, all of that stuff goes up. And I love the way that you mentioned the nature. I always think I write a lot, I journal every morning about how nature nurtures for me. And it's really important to me. I want to go back. I mean, you have such an incredible dossier, if you will, of things you've accomplished. Dr. Gordon, what are the things you're most proud of, like on this journey you've been on and where you are today?
Oh, that's a good one because I think it changes from day to day. But I think what I'm most proud of today is allowing myself and the people who I support to experience what rest would feel like, what healing would look like, in a radical way. As a radical storyteller, I think shaping the narrative for other people of what rest looks like, resisting this need to get another accolade or another, certificate, and really focusing on being good at what you do, right? Being good at what you do is important. It brings a lot of validation and support. And so in my health equity work, getting the award to be the Gene Spurlock, Minority Fellowship Award recipient was just amazing. Because there's women like that who've championed health equity for children and women. To be one of those individuals, it's just a milestone. I got that actually at a 360 moment for me. It was like in New Orleans that I got the award, and I grew up in New Orleans, went to medical school in New Orleans. And so to get the award for the American Psychiatric Association in my hometown was
Mm.
just amazing. I mean, just that was in 2022. So I think that has been a big one for me. But my greatest accomplishment is my two girls. And I have them through surrogacy. And so that's just like, even in my family to have done something like that. No one in my family had done that before, right? The first doctor, the first family to do a surrogacy that way. We did adoption, but it shows that we are actually transforming how we see community and how that comes together, how family comes together too. So those are accomplishments for me right now.
I do like the comment around the radical storytelling. I want to sort of get a little deeper into that. Because obviously you've done these peer-reviewed publications on the impact of racism, on health disparities and stuff. Is that what you mean when you talk about radical storytelling, going into communities, sharing these stories? I would love to know.
Radical storytelling is something that I, started using to explain what it takes to be authentically sharing your journey, right? It takes a person who is ready and willing to say it, all of the parts of it. I remember being assistant professor at a place, and I would tell my story to the residents because I wanted them to understand what it meant to be resilient and to go through challenges without fear, right? Radical storytelling is when you start becoming creative with your resources, right? So maybe you have, let's say you have the skill set to dance, and that's the one thing you're good at. How many people can you inspire by cultivating that gift? And so radical storytelling is about really understanding where your superpower lies and being confident that even if it's just one person that you reach, that one person can reach so many more. So owning that and sitting in that space is really important, I think, for women, right? And we know the power when women use their voice authentically, without fear of judgment,
Yeah.
the rejection that comes along, all of those things are there. But when you speak in truth and love, it redefines what it means to be alive. And that's what really we really want. We want to feel alive. We don't want to feel numb to our circumstances. And so I think that's what radical storytelling means to me.
First of all, thank you for sharing that because I interpreted it a little differently. I think I came at it just from your background about going after racial health disparities and race, and from that perspective. So I
Mhm.
took a different lens on it, but I love where you are, because where you are, it heals the world. I mean,
Mm.
not that the other doesn't heal the world, but you live in that space and you can get stuck in that space. And I think when you open up to this other thing and create this platform for people to have like really authentic, open-hearted conversations where they can speak their truths, regardless of what their truths are. I think it's really interesting. And then you also made another comment that really stuck with me, Dr. Kimberly, which was the fact that you're changing your families, your communities, the way they see things. And I
Mm.
think that that's just, I mean, to me, I would take one less award to be able to do that, because that's the stuff that touches the soul. And so I think that that's amazing. That's just amazing. I have another question for you. What would you say your March for Mental Wellness is? How are you marching for it?
I march for mental wellness by showing up in a space that is real, that's forceful, that's dynamic, that's ready to meet the need. When I thought about the concept of marching, I'm a March baby, so I grew up in March. So something like when the Saints go marching in, I don't know if you're from New Orleans, when the Saints go marching in, oh Lord, I want to be remembered. Well, anyways, I love to sing. That's one of my gifts. But I think marching for mental wellness and health it's it's a journey, right? It's not a destination, it's a journey. That march sometimes may be holding another person's hand and lifting them up. And sometimes it may be running full speed. But wherever you are in the journey, in that march, there's space for healing, right? Mental wellness is understanding and appreciating that we all are going to experience depression. Just face it. Like grief is depression. Sorry. We try to give names to everything. Come on now. Syndromes in psychiatry and all of the diagnoses are important. But the reality is that we're all going to experience at some point in our life loss. We're going to experience death. We're going to experience setbacks. We're going to experience disappointments, despair, anxiety, fears. And when we appreciate that we're all in it together, that either we're just coming through something or we're heading towards it. I just got through with depression, but someone else is heading towards depression. But at the same time, we're in it together. We're marching towards the victory, which is overcoming that distress to being on the other side of it. That's what March for Wellness means to me. Please tell me what it means to you.
For me, it's about being in solidarity and really giving women voice to go out there and support each other, wherever they are. To your point, I think it is about where we are on our journey. We're all at different points, experiencing different things. Mental health, goes up and down and sideways. It is not a linear journey. So for me, the notion of solidarity and women coming together in support of each other, and then having these incredible experts like yourself and thought leaders who can speak to it in such an uplifting way. And I think what's been really fascinating about this conversation for me is the world is really lucky to have you, because these superpowers that you have really can be the catalyst for change in individual lives. And I think back to your point of the community, or, globally, as we look at the world, if we don't have people like yourself doing these and being able to make it accessible to people, you can't really inspire that action. So
Elizabeth, you just gave me goosebumps and just gave me so you gave me peace right now with that comment you made, because I think for many years because I got the accolades, I got the degrees, the positions, all of those things, that I thought I had to show up a certain way to be defined as successful. Like maybe I wasn't articulate enough, maybe I didn't use all the medical terms that everyone wanted to hear that I know very well and can probably say it better than most. But it was something about being human that felt good to me, that made me feel like myself, right? And so whichever way, as women, we decide to show up as professionals, just remember that all of it is okay. But what helped me heal from, intergenerational traumas, from individual traumas, from historical traumas, from societal traumas, was really understanding that my voice, my unique voice, was enough, right? That I didn't have to have those things to be a success story. Those things is a part of who I am, but it doesn't define who I am, right? And so I want other people to be able to show a little bit more of that for themselves in the world.
I love that. And I think that the more physicians are able to communicate to people, meet people where they are, the more success you'll have. And so I would imagine your success will be all of the souls you help heal. You'll get
Mm,
the awards. You'll get the awards. Just do the work. I always said, do the work. Plant the seeds. Keep planting the seeds, because you are doing it and you are who you are. And the flowers will blossom, and there'll be many different flowers, and your garden will be beautiful because that's who you are. Yeah.
And the
So
same for you, Elizabeth. You're planting those seeds. Under the sisterhood, I know that you had to go through something to inspire this act, this movement. In my space, we call it the Rewrite the Narrative movement. I don't know if you call your group a movement, but it is a movement for change. And I really appreciate the opportunity to get to know your folks and to be a part of this network. And thank you so much for all the accolades that you're giving me today.
Well, I have one last question, which I think you'll appreciate this, which is, this is your platform to give a message to women of all ages, of all backgrounds, LGBTQIA, and all cultures. What do you want to leave them with, Dr. Kimberly?
But what I want to leave you guys with is that if you are experiencing burnout or you are experiencing some type of trauma or loss in your life, oftentimes we think, well, I'll just kind of see what happens. Don't wait too late to go get support, right? If it's mental health support, you need a therapist or a counselor, that's okay. We all have that. I've had my own psychiatrist and therapist, not afraid to say that. I'm so excited about it, destigmatizing what mental health looks like, because many physicians are unwell, okay? And can you imagine the unwell trying to treat the unwell? It's just not a good look. So go get help. I'm going to encourage you guys to, in this year, because we're approaching 2025. So if you need to activate yourself with accountability, a partner, a coach, go get it. Invest in that for yourself. It can be transformational. I think there are a lot of people who have mental health issues that with a coach, they will actually be doing a lot better, to be quite honest, because it's a different framework and different philosophy. So I would encourage you to do both. Get you a therapist, get a good one, and get you a coach. I can't be both because of my, limitations in terms of what the work I do. But I would encourage you to reach out to Dr. Kim Answers if you're looking for solutions to everyday problems, right? Well, I talk about racism all day, but our problems are not racism. That's a part of the problem. Our problem is our ability to overcome obstacles with integrity of our worthiness. Our greatest fear, I think, is the feeling of unworthiness. And so we can actually work to heal the nation, to heal the world. That's important. So I just say in the new year, encourage yourself to invest in your future happiness. And for me, happiness is joy. Not this artificial happiness. I buy a coat and I'm feeling better, but joy that's in the inside that actually spreads on the outside.
I do want to say thank you so much for getting under the hood with me today. And I really appreciate your sharing your story, your expertise, everything that you're doing to help make the world a healthier place. Thank you.
Same, thank you.
Thanks for listening to Under the Sisterhood. If you haven't already, please give us a quick rating and review on Apple or Spotify. And make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn so you can hear from more amazing women. This podcast is created and hosted by Under the Sisterhood LLC and Elizabeth Elfenbein, produced by Elizabeth Elfenbein and Matt Butler, and edited by Matt Butler. The music is by Ayla Schaefer. Her song, Rose.